Hello and welcome to all on Watches TV for the June edition of Primetime Watchmaking in the News. And as you can probably notice, I am wearing something pretty exciting on my wrist with the new MB&F LM Sequential Evo, a very special and innovative chronograph. And I will get back on this one shortly, and I will also talk about the new Akrivia Chronometre Contemporain 2, a special and slightly unnoticed timer by Ulysse Nardin, a technically inspired review of Zenith's latest revival Observatory timepiece, and we'll talk plastic watches. Yes, you heard me right. And quickly wanted to mention that between the 14th and 18th of June will be held the EPHJ trade fair dedicated to the suppliers of the industry here in Geneva. We'll be there, of course. And for those in the vicinity, just want to do a small shout out since a private tour of the exhibition is organized on Wednesday the 15th, followed by a lunch with our good friend Kari Voutilainen, among other watchmakers. And there are still a couple of places available. So if you're interested, well, simply send us an email and we'll get back to you. But yes, only a couple of places are available to show you kind of a behind the scene of the industry. But besides this special visit, well, naturally anyone can come, just need to buy a ticket. And personally, I really love it there with all the companies and artisans, which are one way or the other behind many of your favorite timepieces. So let's talk watches and watchmaking news. And I will first start by sending a very warm birthday greeting to Philippe Dufour, who just had his birthday. A very nice one. And I also just wanted to really thank all of you for the many nice comments you guys shared regarding the latest video published a couple of weeks ago with our follow-up on Daniela and her evolution in that wonderful workshop. And if you haven't seen it, well, you know what to do. A real must. So I loved making it, loved sharing it, and we will of course pursue this in the coming month because she's definitely learning fast. Again, a very happy birthday to you, and I can't tell you everything, but we will have another type of really interesting follow-up series coming pretty soon. Just a bit of teasing, but I already know you will like it. So regarding watches, and before talking novelties, I wanted to come back on a timepiece that I believe got seriously unnoticed since its launch a few years back, and this is the Ulysse Nardin Marine Regatta, and is actually a super interesting watch, and I had the perfect excuse to test it extensively as a few weeks back I went to Croatia for some nice sailing holiday with some good friends. So the program was Regatta every day, and therefore I really wanted to use it in some proper environments, and it really has an amazingly cool and unique timer function. So before the start of the race, you simply select how many minutes you want to count down by pressing the pusher at 10 o'clock, and you can select between 1 and 10 minutes. In my case, I set it on 5 minutes, and this is when it already starts to be extremely exciting, because when I press the start-stop chrono pusher, well, look at this. The central second hand goes backwards, quite unusual, right? But so adequate when you're talking timer function. So the countdown continues, and with the small yellow hand on the upper counter, you can also see quite well how much time is remaining, since this one also goes in a reverse mode. But now the uber cool part is when you reach 0. Well, this is what happens. Yeah, pretty sweet, right? And from that point on, it simply works like a regular chrono, keeping time of your race in that sub-dial at 6 o'clock with minutes and hour indication. It's extremely easy to use, extremely visual, and simply extremely useful. And yes, you can also time your eggs with it or whatever you want. So I just love this strange backwards-forwards motion, and going by watchmaker friend of mine, Ulysse Nardin used a differential system to achieve this. Anyhow, just wanted to show you this because unfortunately this watch is no longer part of the brand's assortment. Too bad in my opinion, but maybe they are working on a revised version, since this one, as I mentioned, was introduced already a few years back. But sincerely, I think it's too bad that it didn't get the spotlight I think it deserved. But a big thanks to the Ulysse Nardin team who kindly lent it to me. Really liked it. So let's continue with chrono-like pieces, but very fresh ones with the one on my wrist. This is the new Legacy Machine Sequential Evo by MB&F, and can you imagine that this is already the brand's 20th caliber, showcasing quite nicely, to say the least, the creativity of Mac Busser's team, and not only in a design way for sure, but mechanically speaking, of course, 20 caliber, that's quite something. And I will do a direct demonstration of how it works, and it's extremely easy and intuitive. So this is a sports watch. It's water resistant to 80 meters. You have a screw down crown, and of course those two different counters. They work completely independently from one another. And if I just press this one, okay, off the counter goes. You have a 30-minute counter up here at 12 o'clock. Well, actually two of them, of course. And This one, the chrono is gone. I can press for the second one. It works completely independently, but it's only uses the same balance. So this is really interesting feature. Anyhow, now I can stop the first one, reset to 0, and it's extremely easy to use. But now comes a very interesting feature. They call it the twinverter, and by pressing this button here at 9 o'clock, actually both chronos start at the very same time. It's kind of a split second in a certain way, but very differentiated from one another. I can stop the first one, the other one continues. I can either make it continue by pressing it again, or if I want to reset to 0, just stop it and put it back to 0, while the other one is just working very nicely. I mean, again, extremely easy to use, and just a wonderful timepiece to have on your wrist. And in this case, a special mention to Stephen McDonald, who developed this movement, the very talented watchmaker, already responsible of the great LM Perpetual, of course one of the coolest QP ever, but let's make our lives easier or more interesting than me, and let's simply listen to Stephen, who will explain some of its feature, as the other day he was here at our club space for the live launch of this incredible timepiece, and you will now see a pretty short extract, but I clearly invite you to check MB&F's YouTube channel if you want to see more about it. It is really worth it.
The chronograph is yet another example of a sort of a complication, which it's been around for a long time, and in 100, 150 years, it hasn't really evolved. Nobody's done anything with it. Nobody's made it any more interesting, And the origin of the idea comes from the concept of sports timing. So if you go back 100 or 110 years, something like that, that was an era when things like motor racing was emerging as a big thing, and technically people had to find ways to time flying laps. But what I mean is, if you're going to do 5 laps, even if you're running or you're cycling or you're driving or whatever, you're going to do 5 flying laps, which means that you don't stop or pause between lap 1, lap 2, etc. You have to find a way to time lap 1 and then immediately reset things and time lap 2 and so on. So every chronograph has got just that basic gear train, barrel, gear train, escapement and oscillator. It has those key elements. But then what we do with a chronograph is that we add a second mechanism. So there's a chronograph mechanism which is sort of superimposed on the basic mechanism, and it has to have a system which will allow the chronograph system to be connected to and disconnected from the basic movement. The basic movement is running all the time. Your watch never stops. It's always running. So, but you have to be able to disconnect and connect and disconnect this chronograph system, and it's in doing that really is that's the key to what's going on here.
These two chronographs, if both of them are stopped, you press the twinverter, both chronographs start. If both are working, whenever they are, wherever they are, they both stop immediately. If one is working and the other one is not working, when you press the twinverter, the one which is working stops, the one which was not working starts. And thanks to that simple idea, but incredible implementation, we're able to have 4 different functions. The third function is the sequential. It's called the sequential. It's the first chronograph ever which can allow you to count all the laps of a race. So we start the car starts its race. The right-hand chronograph is timing the first lap. You let the lap go around. Let's imagine it's a very fast lap. It's past the line now. You press the twinverter. You see that the right chronograph stopped, and exactly at the same time, the left one started.
You've got, each chronograph has its own barrel, it's got its own gear train, but what is very important is that for this accuracy feature, the two gear trains converge on the same escape wheel pinion. So if you look down here, you can see this is one of the, I'm going to talk about the vertical clutch in a minute, but this is one of the clutches, this is the other clutch, then you've got intermediate wheels here and here, but what you see is that there's a single escape wheel and a single lever, and then the balance is obviously there, but you don't see it in this image. So because the two gear trains converge on the same oscillator, they're timed from the same oscillator, therefore there is absolutely no difference in timing rate between chronograph A and chronograph B. So that assures the sort of the timing aspect.
Okay, I will of course need to get this watch back to MB&F, but already pretty nice to have enjoyed it like this. And for info, there are two versions, this orange dial one and a black version coming in a 44mm zirconium case, and those are not limited by production capacities. Okay, so let's now continue with a really beautiful timepiece, as we had the pleasure of having the latest model from Akrivia in our studio the other day here, named the Rexhep Rexhepi Chronometre Contemporain 2RRCC02, which was launched for the 10th anniversary of the brand and features two important particularities. The major one is that it is a deadbeat second, and the other is that it has a zero reset function. So in other words, the second hand of that watch makes one jump every second with a pretty rare mechanism with two barrels, one solely for the deadbeat second, and making sure that it works perfectly and making an exact jump of 6 degrees, the result of 360 degrees divided by 60 seconds. If you think that there could be small irregularities, it does not come from the mechanism, but from some minute and understandable irregularities on the counter of the handmade enamel dial. So it's totally excusable and very minute again. So as I said, this watch also holds a zero reset function, and to make it short, when you pull out the crown for setting the time, the second hand goes automatically to zero, a bit like the reset of a chronograph. As always, the quality of the finishing of the movement is exceptional, and as a side geeky note, we must admit that we have realized that the metal plate on the balance bridge is there not to hold the cap jewel, but to hold the hairspring. In other words, if you disassemble that plate from the balance bridge, you will see an empty hole and no rubies in it. Kind of a little trompe-l'œil, but yes, a gorgeous piece. Okay, next timepiece with a surprising collaboration between three partners, Zenith, Kari Voutilainen, and Philips, the auction house, yeah, that's right, to make a revival of an important and successful observatoire movement from Zenith. We only have a few pictures to share with you, but we have some additional information about this very interesting movement. So what is so exceptional about that movement? Well, at first glance, you see that it has a prestigious Guillaume balance. Well, okay, not everyone will have noticed, but that's totally normal. And we might say that those are the most prestigious type of bimetallic balance wheels, and to work properly, they always have to be cut twice. Most of the bimetallic balance wheels are cut twice, very close to the arms, but if they are cut twice at around 30 degrees of angle from the balance arms, then it is a Guillaume balance wheel, which is near to the highest quality of thermic compensating balance wheels. And to be sure to work properly, it has to be linked to a blue steel hairspring. If it is a modern hairspring with no temperature variation, then it will not work properly, since both compensations, balance and hairspring, have to work symmetrically together. And for info, the name Guillaume comes from Charles-Édouard Guillaume, born in Fleurier in 1861, who received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1920, mainly for the invention of a nickel-steel alloy called Invar, used on the Guillaume balance wheels. You see, watchmaking can even lead to Nobel Prize. Apart from this unique feature, the construction of that movement is very interesting and made for an observatory movement, meaning we're talking ultimate precision. And as mentioned, this is a revival timepiece, and the original models won many chronometer prizes in the 50s. Okay, going back to the technical things, if you want to make your balance wheel as large as possible in order of having the biggest inertia possible, well, the first element that would make your life complicated is the escapement wheel. On regular movements, the escapement wheel is almost always on the same level as the balance wheel. And if you have a look at this observatory movement, well, the escapement wheel is placed under the balance wheel, which precisely allows for having a larger balance wheel. As well, in order to master the effect of the gravity and almost erase it as on a tourbillon, well, that movement has a beautiful overcoiled hairspring, also usually called Breguet hairspring. It's quite easy to identify. If you see that the two brass pins holding the end curve of the hairspring are above the hairspring, then it's an overcoiled hairspring. If the two brass pins are next to the hairspring, well, it's a flat hairspring. So two other details are also important. So to keep the torque or force as regular as possible, that movement has no central second, which would be an additional complication, but a second hand directly placed on the axis of its third wheel placed at 6 o'clock. This is in order to make it as easy and as efficient as possible if we speak about the regularity and torque of the movement, something naturally important for precision. So another important detail is the click on the ratchet wheel. It is a special click that always brings the ratchet back on 2 or 3 teeth to make sure that it is never completely fully wound, which could affect the precision. Well, these were some very geeky details we wanted to share with you about this watch, and 10 pieces of this model will be produced, but in the intro I did use the word surprising, as it was Philips, Bax and Russo who led this development and asked Kari Voutilainen to produce the dial and to take care of the finishing of the movement. And the other surprise is that this watch will be priced around 130,000 Swiss francs, quite an amount when you consider that the base movement was already existing, but in these crazy days, well, I'm pretty sure they will all be sold. Well, they probably already all are. All right, let's completely change subject, and I want to talk about this for quite a while, as we will now talk plastic watches, because one has to acknowledge that one of the greatest marketing coups in watchmaking of the last few years has been achieved by Swatch with the launch of the Omega Moon Swatch. How crazy was this, and bravo to them to have pulled this off, so clever, nicely opportunistic, but in a good way, and actually quite needed, as Swatch definitely lost quite a lot of its appeal in the recent years, losing money, closing down shops all over the world, and you just have to imagine how many swatches you need to sell on a monthly basis simply to cover the cost of your shop and pay for the necessary marketing campaigns. So as much as the Swatch has been quite a lifesaver of the Swiss watchmaking industry in the 80s, well, competition has now become really hard on them, but I can assure you that this Moon Swatch raid has been naturally extremely beneficial, both in terms of money, but more importantly in terms of marketing, bringing people massively back in those shops, enabling the brand to show their other models, and probably increasing quite nicely overall sales. And I must admit that it made me happy to witness such an enthusiasm. Definitely a breath of fresh air for Swatch, and for pieces that weren't limited, well, quite an incredible achievement. But let's now compare plastic watches, since in front of me I do have the Mission to Neptune version. Don't worry, I didn't stand in line for 10 hours for it. But I also have the Icon Tide by Maurice Lacroix, a new collection which was launched just a couple of days before the Moon Swatch, and I can't imagine the face of the Maurice Lacroix team when they saw this coming out, and obviously the tsunami that followed. Anyhow, the Swatch is priced at 250 Swiss francs, the Icon at 590, so quite a difference, but when you look closer, there are quite some differences between the two. So first of all, in terms of packaging, you do get you do get a little bit more with the Icon, and I will simply unbox this. So with the Swatch comes in a kind of carton case, and with the Maurice Lacroix, well, you do get, like I said, a little bit more. First you get this little bag, I don't know exactly what it's for. Inside you would have a plastic cup using the recycled plastic, the Tide recycled plastic that you can use, and you have the watch inside. So we'll open these two up, and there you go. All right, let's take them both out now. So the Swatch uses what they call this bioceramic material, proprietary to the Swatch group. It feels a little bit different than the Maurice Lacroix one. In terms of strap, here you have a nice rubber strap, actually quite comfortable. Here I think the strap of the Swatch looks a little bit on the cheapy side, but I've seen people change it quite often, and it looks afterwards pretty cool. Nevertheless, I mean, a very, very cool watch, and going by the success it encountered, of course, I'm not the only one to have thought so, and you could choose so many different colors. Here is the same. Anyhow, the feel of that plastic is really not comparable to the other, and on top of it, this is made out of recycled plastic, which gives it a little bit more substance, I think. This watch is water resistant, but only for a few meters, and I wouldn't go too much in the water with it, whereas this one is water resistant to 100 meters. You do have a screw-down crown, and here you have a plastic glass. Here this is a sapphire glass. So there are indeed a few differences between the two, and I can totally understand people wanting or choosing one or the other corresponding to their personal preferences. Indeed, you can't really compare the two. Well, I wish both of them plenty of success. I'm pretty sure these will stay in the assortment of Swatch for quite a while, and these ones also probably will evolve also. You have different choices of colors. Anyhow, nice little summer watch, both of them. But I will change my strap. I just wanted to show it to you the way it originally is. Let's continue this prime time. So in May, we weren't only invited to Paris by Vacheron Constantin for a fantastic experience. Again, not every day that you can wander around the Louvre almost by yourself. and see these new métier d'art timepieces next to their antiquity inspiration. But we were also invited to London to visit the private collection of a rather unique collector who wanted to share his passion with as many people as possible, well, almost as many as possible, but at least we were there. This collection is the private collection of Mr. Patrick Guetret, the Frenchman, who started this collection 4 decades ago. And the collection now holds around 600 watches, and during all that time he just sold one piece and kept all the others, and a selection of nearly 160 pieces was exposed at the Design Museum in London. A large part of them are from Patek Philippe, then Rolexes, and ending with 3 independents, FPJ on Kari Voutilainen and Akrivia. They always start to pop up, don't they? Anyhow, among the Patek Philippe watches, well, he definitely has very many beautiful pieces, some even coming from the original Graves collection. That speaks quite a lot. One of them, a pocket watch tourbillon, has an interesting power reserve display, as it used to be made many decades ago. Where it is written down is the highest figure, and when it is written up, it's actually the lowest figures in terms of power reserve. So it's actually quite the opposite of today's watches, and we can only think of one watchmaker pursuing this tradition, François-Paul Journe, and his hand-winding watches. And of course, some of those pieces by FP Journe with this little detail were also shown in London within the Oak Collection exhibition. And this exhibition will normally continue its journey, most probably in the US, Asia, and maybe the Middle East. And a big thanks to Mr. Guetret for sharing his passion with us, and many other people, okay? And let's listen a bit to 2 experts who helped pull all this together.
So here we are at the Oak exhibition in London at the Design Museum. The Oak exhibition is based on this 3 words: one of a kind. This is the project that was put together by the collector, and if we go through the exhibition, there are, of course, mostly Patek Philippe watches. Then we have a section on Rolex, and then we have a section on independent watchmakers.
Au XXe siècle, la Calatrava devient un emblème commercial qui s'affiche sur les montres, notamment dans les années 1960 au niveau de la couronne. On retrouve cette croix de Calatrava dans tous les documents publicitaires de l'époque, et c'est seulement à la fin des années 1980 que ce nom devient synonyme de montre au niveau des collections, et surtout auprès des collectionneurs, notamment les collectionneurs italiens, qui adorent à cette époque, les premiers collectionneurs de montres bracelets, donner des surnoms aux montres. Donc cette Calatrava était à ce moment-là surnommée aussi Moneta par les collectionneurs de cette époque. L'histoire des montres à heure universelle est fortement liée au nom de Louis Cottier. Et Louis Cottier était déjà dans les années 1920 le restaurateur attitré de Hans Wilsdorf, le directeur, enfin le fondateur de la maison Rolex. Et Louis Cottier a restauré toutes ces montres de poche anciennes. Avec la dépression de 1929, l'horlogerie suisse a été bien malmenée et de nombreux horlogers se sont retrouvés au chômage. À cette époque, Louis Cottier a donc commencé à mettre sur le papier différentes inventions qu'il a ensuite brevetées dans différents domaines de l'horlogerie, et notamment son mécanisme d'affichage de l'heure universelle. Donc à cette époque, c'est la famille Stern, donc les frères Jean et Charles Stern, qui ont même payé pour lui tous les frais liés au dépôt de brevets. Dans la Oak Collection, on retrouve quelques montres de poche réalisées dans les années 1920-1930 pour un collectionneur américain, Henry Graves Jr., qui était issu d'une famille de banquiers new-yorkais. Et donc, M. Guetret est aujourd'hui l'heureux propriétaire de quelques montres de poche ayant appartenu à cette famille, notamment d'un tourbillon qui, pendant une vingtaine d'années, est resté la montre ayant eu le plus beau résultat jamais obtenu au concours de l'Observatoire astronomique de Genève.
Here we are in the section where we have done some selection around the brand Rolex. We have done a selection of chronographs, and the chronographs at Rolex represent a very important era of this brand, especially with the Rolex Daytona from 1963. Everyone knows that the Rolex Daytona appeared on the market in 1963, and there has been many variants.
Dans la dernière section de la Hawk Collection, on retrouve une vitrine dédiée aux nouveaux horlogers indépendants. Parmi ceux-ci, fer de lance de cette nouvelle tendance horlogère, l'on retrouve François-Paul Jour qui a créé des modèles de montres tout à fait particuliers, inspirés notamment de Georges Daniels, mais également d'Abraham Louis Breguet. Dans cette vitrine, on trouve également des pièces faites par Kari Voutilainen, un horloger d'origine finlandaise établi également en Suisse depuis une vingtaine d'années, mais également de plus jeunes horlogers comme Rexhep Rexhepi avec sa marque Akrivia de Genève, donc qui sont l'horlogerie, la jeune horlogerie d'aujourd'hui et celle de demain.
It is very important to see that the exhibition in itself, under the thematic of one of a kind, has brought together not only watches which are one of a kind, but also the vision of the collector. The vision of the collector is, I think, the most important in this exhibition. He has this sense that for the first time in history, a watch collector has bought his collection or part of his collection to an art museum. This is an event that will mark history for the next generation. Here at the London Design Museum, for the first time, watches were exhibited as pieces of art.
Okay, and lastly, just wanted to highlight a very special lot that will be auctioned in New York on the 11th of June by Philips, yes, them again, with a masterwork by George Daniels, the anniversary platinum wristwatch bearing movement serial number 00. And this lot is so unique that online bidding will not be possible. You will have to register, and we're pretty sure this one will attain record-breaking numbers. What a timepiece. Okay, so this is finally it for this edition of Primetime. Really can't thank enough for all the kind words we receive. And this month also represents something very unique, as we are doing a soft launch of what will become an extremely significant project for us with the introduction of the Horopedia Foundation. But I will get back on this in due time with all the details of my vision when it comes to preservation of knowledge, and actually goes a little bit beyond this. But just give us a little bit of time with this. So thanks so much for watching, sharing and commenting. We love it. A massive thanks to our patrons, and see you real soon with some new videos, and we have some really good ones coming your way. The very best to all. Viva watchmaking. All the best.